Hello and welcome. This is Modelling for Advantage. So, today we are going to be talking about Codex Supplement Blood Angels. The Sons of Sanguinious have finally got their new shiny Codex supplement that allows them to work with the new Codex Space Marines. So I'm going to go over today my 10 standout points that I got from reading through the Codex supplement. I'll just start by saying that I'm kind of going to ignore the fact that there was the little index that came out. It was only out for about a month and a half, and I think it's more relevant to compare it to the previous Codex than it is to mention all the index stuff and the little tiny changes that have happened to certain stat blocks since then. Another thing is that in general, I feel the rules in the Codex supplement have been toned down slightly, and that's a little bit of a theme as we go through. But I think that's reasonably fair due to the fact we've now got access to all of the Codex Space Marine stuff. Another thing to mention is I'm not going to go into the Flesh Terror rules here. Flesh Terror players are going to be really happy. They've actually got quite a good set of rules. They've got a couple of relics, they've got a couple of unique stratagems, they've got a character of their own who's really good. But Blood Angels themselves don't get access to any of their stuff, whereas weirdly Flesh Terrors get access to quite a lot of the Blood Angel stuff. So for Flesh Terror players out there, you've got a good old Codex supplement here that will allow you to get a lot more flavour out of it than you previously would have. But let's get on, shall we? So, number one, I am going to talk about the new missions that are in there. So, the chapter approved missions. There's a set of 4, as there seems to be in each of these Space Marine supplements, and they're pretty flavourful, which we've come to expect. There's one in there which is kind of like a challenge one, similar to the Space Wolves. There's one about killing everything with your Death Company, which is fun. But I think the best one that's in there is called Relentless Assault. Now, it seems pretty doable with most armies you can put together, which is a good thing if you're playing the army, but maybe a bad thing overall. It involves that at the end of your turn, if you have more units in the opponent's deployment zone than they have in your deployment zone, you score 4 victory points. That seems pretty easy to do. Do it turn 1 with a drop pod. After that, all your deep striking units really want to be in their deployment zone. So that seems like a really strong option for the Blood Angels from the get-go, and I think that could see use in a lot of lists. The second thing I'm going to speak about is the Death Company. This seems to be a real focus of this book, and it's one of my favourite things about the Blood Angels, the falling to the Black Rage, and they're really trying to invoke that a bit more and give you a bit more stuff to play with the Death Company. So first of all, the original Death Company have gained an additional wound, like most old school Marines, and that makes them a lot more viable. They've gone up a few points, but they're still pretty good, and the important thing that sets them apart from Death Company intercessors is the fact that they can have jump packs. Doubling their movement speed is a really powerful thing to give them, and I think you'll probably see more of those than the intercessors. The intercessors basically have a slightly better bolt pistol and 1 more attack on their profile. They have less movement because of the lack of jump pack, and they also don't get as good a selection of weaponry. They can't take all special weapons on all of their dudes, so you can't have multiple thunder hammers and stuff like that. So I think you'll see lots of the Death Company original guys. But they've also given you the ability called the Lost. So you can upgrade one of your captains and 2 of your lieutenants, and they slightly change their abilities, so their aura abilities only affect Death Company. They can no longer be your Warlord, and they can't have any of the other chapter upgrades put on them like Chapter Master, but they gain the Death Company abilities, which are Feel No Pain 6+, and +1 attack on the charge, and also they gain the new Death Company abilities that all Death Company units get, which are not good for the Blood Angel player per se, but they're actually really flavourful. You can no longer do actions with any Death Company units because they're frothing madmen. They want to chop people up with their chainswords. They're not going to sit there and raise a flag or type on a computer or anything. And also, they can never fall back from combat, which is, again, really flavourful. So we don't complain about that. So these characters get that, but the character you've upgraded also get the ability to use some death visions of Sanguinious. So there are 3 different ones, and you can only use each one once per game, and each character can only use 1 per game. There is a stratagem that lets a single character double up on their usage. So the 3 of them are all okay. One of them is not so good, but the other 2 are pretty usable. The first one gives you a load of bonus attacks. You get an extra attack for every enemy within 6 inches of you. That can stack up if you go into a big unit of boys. Going to 30 boys, that's 6 extra attacks of your character. You also get to re-roll all misses when you've got that one active. The second one gives you a 3-up invulnerable save for the turn. That is pretty powerful, especially in a world where Storm Shields now give 4+, and they're attempting to remove a load of the 3+. The last one, you sacrifice all your attacks for the turn to roll off with an opponent, and if you beat them on the roll off, not if you draw and beat them, just if you beat them, you do D3 plus 3 mortal wounds. I think it's a rare case where that is better than just hitting them with whichever killy weapon you've equipped your character with. But really nice flavourful rules. They've still got a couple of stratagems that are Death Company specific. There's one that gives you a 5+ feel no pain instead of a 6+. And there's the most important one is Forlorn Fury, which lets you take a pre-game move. They've slightly reduced its power in that you can now only do a move instead of doing a move and an advance. So with the Jump Pack Death Company, you can move up to 12 inches. But they've reduced the cost to 1 CP unless your unit is above 5 or a Dreadnought. And you can use it multiple times now. So if you have 4 units of Death Company, they can all charge up the field at the start of the game. So Death Company, I think you're going to see them. You can make whole armies of them now. Really good, really fun. Okay, number 3 on my list is the Warlord traits. Now, this was always something in the previous Blood Angel Codex. The Warlord traits were pretty lackluster. Everyone used to take Artisan of War, which gave you +1 damage on one of your weapons, and the rest of them were pretty rubbish. But now they've upgraded most of them. So there's one that gives you a 5+ feel no pain against mortal wounds in a nice 6-inch bubble around your character. That's pretty powerful. There's one that is called, he looks down again, he's written it down, Gift of Foresight, which I think you'll see a lot on kind of like your more killy characters. It gives you 1 reroll save, 1 reroll wound roll, and 1 reroll hit roll each player turn for that character. That's really powerful on a melee character with a decent invulnerable save, and especially on the fact that their auras no longer affect themselves, so the reroll to hit is also really good. So I think you'll see that quite a lot. And Artisan of War is a really interesting one. Instead of just giving you the +1 damage on a weapon, it now lets you take one of these special issue relics. So you take a Warlord trait which allows you to take a relic, but the thing is you can take that additional relic in addition to a relic you've already given them. So you can have a character with 2 relics. So you can give your character, say, the Teeth of Terror, and then you could also give him the Adamantian Mantle, which gives you a 5-up feel no pain, or you could give him the armour that gives a 2+ armour save, or you could actually take the Mastercrafted Weapon, which gives you +1 damage on a weapon. So it lets you mix and match, and I think it just opens up the variety of characters you can make, which I really like. Number 4 is the Sanguinary Psychic Discipline. Now, this is one of those cases where we compare it to the old Codex, and it's definitely been toned down. The powers haven't really changed their effects very much. One of them has changed, so instead of granting unit +1 attack, it now gives them extra hits on 6s. That's a bit of a wash. I think the sweet spot is if you've got 4 attacks per model, you slightly generate more hits. If you've got less than 4, then the old version was slightly better. But the other 2 things that are here, the 2 powers that you come to for the Sanguinary Discipline, are Wings of Sanguinious and the Quickening. And they are both still here and they're both still good. And that's pretty key because the Librarian Dreadnought and Mephiston are both locked into only taking Sanguinary Discipline powers. And on both of those models, these are the 2 powers you really want. So Wings of Sanguinious has been made significantly worse, but it's still good. So that shows that it was really probably too good before. So now it is Warp Charge 7, so that's 1 more than it was, or it might be 6 and it used to be 5. I know it's 1 higher. It still grants you a free 12-inch move with Fly, which is really good, but it used to also give you reroll charges, which it no longer does, and it used to also let you keep your 12 inches Fly movement all through your next movement phase, which it doesn't do anymore. So it's lost quite a few things and gone up in cost, and it's still good. You're still going to take it on Mephiston and the Librarian Dreadnought every time. So still a great power. The Quickening still gives you +D3 attacks. It's actually reduced in Warp Charge, which is handy, but it no longer gives you +3 to advance and charge rolls. It's a little theme through the Blood Angel Codex, or the Blood Angel Codex supplement compared to the old Codex, that they've taken away a load of things that gave you longer charges. So instead of giving you +3 inches to your charge rolls, this now lets you re-roll your charge roll, which is still good, but it's nowhere near as good as a +3 inch. Or so they say. So that's the Sanguinary powers. They're still pretty good. They're still really good on Mephiston and the Dreadnought, and that's the key thing, really. Next up, we talk about relics. Now, the relic selection has gone down quite a lot, and we've lost quite a few of the old favourites. Things like the Standard of Sacrifice has gone. The little cap you could wear that gave you command points back has gone. The Biomantic Sarcophagus is gone, which is a bit of a pity. That was the upgrade for the Librarian Dreadnought. But there are still a couple of good ones in here. There's one that is more or less an auto take, and that is the Icon of the Angel, which has now been increased to, it's a 6-inch bubble of reroll charges. It's just really solid. You're going to want it on most of your units, so I can see that being taken in every list. There's also one called the Visage of Death, which is basically a death mask you give a character. Gives them -1 to be hit in close combat, but the most important thing it gives them is that it gives them a 3-inch aura that removes objectives secured from any enemy units within 3 inches of them. That's really powerful, especially when combined with things like the Warlord trait, which can make your units, including the bearer, objective secured. So that one model automatically removes objective secured from anyone near him and has objective secured himself, letting him flip any objective just by moving next to it. So that's a really powerful combo, which I think we'll probably be seeing. And the thing to remember, even though there are not many relics in here, there are 5 kind of like special Blood Angel ones and then some special issue, we do have all the Space Marine ones to use. So there's the Armour Indomitus, the Teeth of Terror and such, which are really great in Blood Angel lists, and we've now got access to them. Okay, number 6, and we're moving on to some of the data sheets that I'm going to touch on. And we're going to start with Dante himself, the commander of the Blood Angels, the regent of Imperial Nihilus. And he has actually been improved greatly compared to the old Codex. He is now much more of a kind of like character of stature that you'd think about. So his weapon's actually got, not worse, but it's just not particularly interesting. It's basically a relic blade. It's exactly the same stats as a relic blade, so it's not that kind of like special. It's still a really good weapon, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then you move on to his special powers. He's now got -1 to be hit at all times because he's wearing Sanguinious' face mask. He's got a command point if he's your Warlord. This is a great thing. It's always been that Dante has been kind of like in lore is the kind of most tactically astute and the oldest and wisest of all the Space Marines. And he gave you nothing. Kind of like Belial used to give you extra command points, Marnius, Calgar, various Chaos dudes, but Dante gave nothing. So now he gives an additional command point. And he also has a special ability that he can use what are they called? They're called Epic Deed Stratagems. So he can use an Epic Deed Stratagem for 0 cost once per game. Now this sounds awesome. And it's really nicely flavourful because he's kind of like supposed to be building himself up to be sacrificed, and he does loads of heroic deeds. But unfortunately, the choice of epic deeds is really, really small. So there are 3 in the new Codex supplement, but only 1 can be used by Dante, unfortunately, just due to restrictions on stratagem use. And in the Space Marine Codex, there is again only 1 he can use. So this special ability allows him to do 2 things. So the first one from the Space Marine Codex is he can fight upon death as long as he hasn't already fought. And that's the one I think you'll see most often being used. It usually costs a couple of command points, so doing that for free, really good. And if Dante dies, you know you've always got that power to trigger and fight back. And he's got lots of attacks and he's pretty deadly. The second one he can use is a new one in the Codex, which forces all enemy units with an engage, or enemy models, distinction is important, all enemy models with an engagement range to hit him. It's called Selfless Sacrifice. And so it's really handy in certain niche situations. It's not one you're going to use very often, but when you do use it, it can be really powerful. So say you're trying to protect a unit who's holding an objective, you can move Dante into as many enemy models as possible, force them to hit him. So it won't come up that often, but he can use it for free once per game, so that's always good. Number 7 is the Sanguinor, the angel manifestation himself. Spirit of the Warp, some call it a demon, some call it Sanguinious' spirit coming to help Blood Angels. In the lore, it kind of like appears out of nowhere and saves Blood Angels in their hour of need. And they've really incorporated that into the rules this time as well. So he's got a special miraculous intervention rule, where when you get to the heroic intervention step of an opponent's charge phase, if the opponent is charged into one of your units that turn, you can just take your Sanguinor model from reserve and stick it down in combat with the enemy unit, anywhere you want, touching that enemy unit. So it's a really powerful ability, a really good threat to hold in reserve against other melee armies to stop them charging in, because the Sanguinor is pretty boss and he'll just charge down and start cutting people up. Also, it's a really good use of the selfless sacrifice ability we just spoke about. You could use it on your Sanguinor when you stick him down, so he can come in and really rescue the situation in that way. So that's pretty good. The rest of Sanguinor's rules are nice. He's got a good sword, he's got good save and stuff, but there are a couple of abilities which are a little bit of a miss. So the Sanguinor's always had an ability which is an aura-based one that gives +1 attack to friendly Blood Angels nearby. He still has that ability, but it specifically stipulates that it doesn't stack with the Shock Assault ability of Space Marines. So it only works the second turn of combat if you've stayed in combat and nothing else has come in. It's pretty niche now, and you're just not going to trigger very often, which is just a little bit feel bad. It's quite a key ability for him, and it very rarely will ever work. And the other thing to say of him is he's got a Warlord trait on him, which buffs up a load of specific auras on the character. So generally they increase the auras on chaplains and captains and chapter masters and such. Dante has the same Warlord trait and makes good use of it. But on the Sanguinor, he has no abilities that get increased by its increased range. So all it does is it's got a secondary caveat on the Warlord trait that lets other things use his leadership within 9 inches, I think. Just not particularly good. I mean, it just seems really silly giving him a Warlord trait that's specified that he can't really use because he has none of the abilities that trigger with it. Just a quick point to make. Next up, we move on to number 8, which is the Sanguinary Priest. Now, the important thing about the Sanguinary Priest is he has the Apothecary keyword, which means you can upgrade him to the Chief Apothecary, which is one of the most powerful things from the Space Marine Codex. But being a Sanguinary Priest, he has a couple of other abilities, and he's also an HQ choice. So in the Blood Angels, you can take a normal Apothecary or an HQ choice Apothecary, so Elite or HQ. So it really helps you when making armies that you'll be able to choose which to do. Also, the Sanguinary Priest, you can give a jump pack too, which is really key. It lets you get his new special auras to the area of the battlefield you want. And he's also, what else does he have? He has a Blood Chalice ability, which lets you choose a unit and put them into Assault Doctrine. Now, the wording is slightly complex because it says, puts into Assault Doctrine when making their attacks. And that doesn't specifically trigger the Blood Angel Super Doctrine, which gives you additional attacks when you're in Assault Doctrine. So it really needs an FAQ to clarify whether they mean for it to trigger your Super Doctrine or not. Because at the minute, the wording means it doesn't, because it only triggers it when you're actually making the attack. So you haven't gained the additional attack to make it with. Bit complex on the wording, and they could have worded it better if they meant it to do it. So we'll have to wait for the FAQ to find out. Number 9, and the last of the data sheets I'll talk about, is the Sanguinary Guard and the Sanguinary Ancient, who has very similar stuff to them. So the Sanguinary Guard are much improved over their Codex Blood Angels variety. It's the same upgrades they had in the Index, but they're worth talking about because they are really pretty good. They didn't gain the additional wound that more kind of like classic Marines gained because they already had 2 wounds, but they did gain additional attack on their profile, which just straight away ups their damage potential by a fair whack. They've also got -1 to be hit in close combat, so that means that they're much tougher when they get to close combat, and they also gain flat damage too on all of their weapons, which is, to my mind, a vast improvement over D3 damage. Knowing how much damage you deal, and it's particularly being 2 with all the Space Marines running around now with 2 wounds, is really powerful and really key to the unit being a hammer unit that you need it to be. So they're really good. The Sanguinary Ancient comes with those similar buffs. Also, all of those Sanguinary units gain +1 to hit when near the Warlord, which is pretty good because it used to be you could re-roll hits near the Warlord, which didn't really kind of like synergize very well with the fact that Warlords often gave re-roll 1s to hit, or if it was Dante, he used to give re-roll all hits. So it didn't synergize well that they were the bodyguard of the Warlord. So +1 to hit actually works with all those auras now, which is good. The Sanguinary Ancient, unfortunately, can no longer take the Banner of Sacrifice. But he has gained 2 new abilities. He's now got a chapter banner, which slightly changed from his old ability, and that gives +1 to hit in close combat for nearby units. And he's also gained the Astartes standard ability, which is the one where somebody falls over, they get to roll a dice, and on a 4+, they get to make a final attack. So he's got more abilities baked in, but he does pay for that in his new price point, where he is actually pretty expensive. He's one of the most expensive of the base characters you can buy now, and whether he's worth it, only time will tell. Okay, the last thing to talk about is the stratagems from the book. And to be honest, they're a little lackluster, certainly in comparison to looking at the stratagems in the old Codex and from the Blood of Baal supplement, which really upgraded the Blood Angels in last edition. They've been toned down a lot. I mean, none of the stratagems cost more than 1 CP, other than ones that cost 2 CP if used on bigger units. So just saying that kind of tells you that they're going for a reasonably baseline stratagem here. They're not giving you anything spectacular. There are a few that we've lost from before, which is sad to say. There is no longer a 3d6 charge stratagem. That's been changed to let you ignore negative charge modifiers. It does give you +1 to hit when you deep strike in, which can be used for shooting on units like Inceptors, but it's not the guaranteed charge that the 3d6 charge used to be. There also used to be one where you could pick a unit up and redeploy it on the battlefield the same turn. That now redeploys it next turn. Losing one of your better units for a whole turn is really not particularly useful in a game like 9th edition, where there's only 5 turns long. So you just can't afford to lose powerful units for that time. It has uses sometimes, but just not that often. A few other stratagems that are useful. Unbridled Ardour, which is the one that lets you heroically intervene with any unit. It now only works on Sanguinary Guard, meaning it's still really powerful for them, but it used to work on any unit in your army, so that's obviously worse. And that's what I mean. The stratagems have just all been toned down. There's nothing spectacular, nothing that kind of stands out as going, oh, I'll build my army and make sure it can do that. They're perfectly serviceable. We've got all the ones from the Space Marine Codex. You're not going to be short of anything to spend your CP on. But the stratagems in this book are, in my mind, the thing that lets it down slightly. But overall, still great fun. Always nice to have some new Blood Angel rules. I mean, it just having your rules fit the new edition makes it much better to use them. And using them with the Space Marine Codex, I'm really happy with how they've done that. And I think that it's a show for certainly the Space Wolf and the Death Watch and the Blood Angel rules that have come out, that they've certainly tried to tone down the vast excesses of the Space Marines from last edition. And once we get a few more Xenos Codex and some Chaos Codexes, we'll see if they're trying to level that off on a whole. Okay, well, get out there, get your Blood Angels out. You can see I've got a fair few behind me here. Get them out, get them on the table when it's safe to do so, and you'll certainly see Michael and I getting a wolf on Blood Angel combat as soon as we are able to do so. Take care, all.
If you like the kind of stuff that we do, rather than just waiting for the blooper reel, why don't you head on over to our website, modelingforadvantage.co.uk. We've got affiliate links to places like Whaling Games there, where when you buy your models, if you buy it through our link, we get a little bit of kickback and it doesn't cost you a penny more.
Company, which is fun, but I think the best one that's in there is one that is called, he's going to forget the first thing he has to remember. Michael's going to have to cut this bit out.